Hi, everybody. Good evening. Welcome to Evoke Therapy Program's broadcast. I'm Dr. Brad Reedy. Today is Tuesday, September 12th, 2023. Tonight's broadcast is an open forum, question and answer. So for those of you that might be new to this format, if you're a live attendee, you can submit questions at any time. Livy, who is moderating for me this evening, will take those questions in the order that they're received, and she will pass them on to me throughout the broadcast when there's time. You can always send in questions, comments, suggestions, asks to webinar@evoketherapy.com in between these sessions. And you can also share this link with your family and friends, with a sibling of your child if you think that'll be helpful for them. Or you can come and offer their questions, and I'll give you my best answer to those questions. So with that, let's get into the pre-submitted questions. And here's question number one. Part one. I have a complicated relationship with my mother. We're incredibly close in some ways. She lives 5 minutes away and comes to our house every day. She has always been incredibly helpful to my family, especially when my kids were little and now as well. If we need any time off for help, she will drop everything and help. On the other hand, she's codependent to the extreme, always saying things like her happiness depends on me and my family. She is divorced, doesn't have friends, and her life is our life. She is not receptive to any kind of suggestions or encouragement to get outside interests, friends, etc. My older son has severe issues, went to Evoke, a therapeutic boarding school, and still struggling in and out of treatment. Since I've been working on myself the last couple of years, I've set up some boundaries with her, such as to let us know ahead of time when she plans to come by every day, rather than just showing up, not to interfere with our upbringing of our kids, especially since the older one has struggled so much. In part two of the question, she refuses to do any work herself. I've sent her numerous Evoke podcasts and she refuses to listen, go to therapy, etc. However, she always plays victim, especially with our younger son who is 17. Anytime he spends any time with her, he then lectures us that we mistreat her, that she does so much for our family and we should treat her better. It is very hurtful to hear that, and I try not to get defensive, although that's hard. He says things like, we're setting up a bad example for him on how to treat parents. And would we want him to treat us like this? It takes all of my willpower not to get defensive and explain to him how much emotional baggage my mom brings with her help and how painful this codependency has been for me. How would you respond to our son if you were in our shoes? Thank you. Leave that question up for a minute, Livy, and don't post another one because I'm going to refer back to it because there's so much there. I'm going to start with the last part of your question just to make this point, and then I'll answer the question. But sort of a process question. How would you respond to our son if you were in our shoes? It's a difficult question to answer because I don't know the context fully. And whenever this is kind of a clue to using therapists. Whenever somebody asks me, what would you do? The problem with that is, in fact, sometimes I'll say this if I have a relationship with them. I'll say, do you mean if I was healthy? Do you mean if I was unhealthy? Do you mean if I was having a good day, a bad day? So my decision making really isn't the thing. And you might not mean that, but I want to make that point because it's important. It's important that my therapist used to say to me for years, she would say to me, don't take what I would do in this situation because I'm crazy and you don't want to follow my lead. And now I realize what she was doing was saying that's really not the thing to follow with the therapist, to ask the therapist what they would do. So that's something that I'll rarely respond to. So that's the process question. And it's actually hard for me to separate out my own context with my own mother. But I will tell you this, specifically to your son, I would not place the burden on him to understand what I was doing. I imagine the response is to listen, to hear him, to set boundaries, and to say, what I don't think the problem is with him. In other words, I don't think that's the level of intervention in this situation. For me, the level of intervention in this situation is to have a conversation with your mother that is non-negotiable. Obviously, she's in some ways recruited him. That's the phrase for this idea of kind of bringing people over to your side to validate your position in life, your position in a certain situation. She's recruited him, and she's undermining you and your parental authority in this situation. So I have a lot of energy about this particular example because I think the situation demands or asks or invites you to have a more difficult conversation with your mother around boundaries. I can tell you, how I've negotiated my own relationship with my own parents, and that there are situations with all the parents that are involved, all the grandparents, I suppose, all of my wife and myself, all of our parents. There are ground rules. There are certain things you're not allowed to say in front of or around our children, or you don't get to come over. There are certain boundaries that I have that are non-negotiable, that I'm not going to beg or plead or want. And ultimately, if you can't respond, there's this idea that I believe in really, really strongly, that I think one of the most common ways that we, and I'm putting this in quotes, that we air quotes, that we abuse our children, because that's a strong word. But one of the ways that we mistreat our children is we allow our parents to mistreat them the same way that they've mistreated us. And I've come to the age in my life, in my 50s, where I have no tolerance for that with my parents or my wife's parents. They I, I don't want my children to be exposed to bad psychology by the big people around them in our family. So my adage. You've done enough work. You've heard by now my adage that in many situations in life, this being one of them, you don't get to win. You get to choose how to lose. And so for me, the discussion is non-negotiable. It is about not taking care of her, and ultimately, what you're describing. You I can't tell you to go to this place because it's not my decision to make, and I don't have the relationship with your mother that you have. But it's beginning to approach the situation where the boundary might have to be severe, might have to be cut off. And by the way, I don't know if this will answer to some extent what you might be able to say to your 17-year-old child, but I've said this to my children, all four of my children, on multiple occasions. If being around me feels toxic, I support you 100% in taking your distance from me. Obviously, when you're a child and you live in my home, you can't opt out of that. But when you become an adult, if being around me feels unhealthy, if it feels compromising to your mental health, you don't have to spend time around me. I would support my clients in doing that. I would support you in doing that. And I know that's the nuclear option, which is, cutting off the relationship with your mother. And I'm not saying it needs to rise to that level at this point. But if the requests and the undermining and the sabotaging and in legal terms, what she's displaying is something we call, in marital relationships, parental alienation. I mean, I feel a lot of energy around recruiting your son against you. So for me, your mother's lack of emotional maturity is not just affecting you. That's why I go back to that idea that we allow our children to abuse our children the way that they abused us, or mistreat our children the way that they mistreated us. It's not just you that's being mistreated anymore. And you can't explain it. You can't put the burden of that insight on your 17-year-old child. It's inappropriate. They're not equipped for it. He's too inclined to want to take care of his grandmother, and she's put him in that position. So for me, at some point, it escalates with some really tough non-negotiable, boundaries that you're not willing to negotiate, some lines in the sand that you're not willing to cross, or to have her cross. And her response is her issue and her problem. I said to my wife just this week, I've said to her, it's not worth it to me to allow people that bring good to our lives to mistreat us, me, our family, our children. It's not worth it. I'd rather go without the help. And what your mother is doing is not okay on a fundamental, consistent level. So I would support you and empower you and encourage you to set the boundaries that you need to with her. And if she's not responding, let her know what the consequences would be. It's the exact same kind of relationship that you have with your child. And yes, your son for now is going to be confused by it and maybe even feel hurt and protective for it on behalf of his grandmother. But in the long run, he's going to realize that a child who becomes an adult isn't obligated to be around a parent who's unhealthy. And as parents grow, like you are growing and becoming more aware and doing your work, as parents grow, the lack of emotional maturity in the parent will be exposed. So it is a fundamental of value of mine that the people around me, the people around you, the people around my children, the people around your children, that we do everything within our power, within reason, to protect that space around us. And if somebody like this is violating that circle in our family, I feel the Papa Bear, the Mother Bear spirit in me being summoned. So I would encourage you to set any boundary necessary to interrupt this cycle of abuse, really, of parental alienation, and of the irony of your son's complaint is it is his grandmother that is modeling intergenerational toxicity and trauma and a lack of healing. This is not small stuff. These are not small moments. This is fundamental to child development, what your mother is doing with your son. So I'm glad you brought it up. I feel strong. I support you, whatever you need to do, all the way up until the point of not having a relationship with her if she can't respond to your basic values. And that might go against some people's idea that you're loyal to your parents and to family members at all costs, no matter what they do to you. I don't share that value. And here, of course, is the great paradox that because I have that value with my children and I say to them that I would support them if they needed to separate from me, my children don't want to be away from me. My children want me with them, because why wouldn't you want to be with somebody who would support you at that level? Who would prioritize your need to be who you are above their need to be cared for? That's a person that you want to stick around. You want to spend time with. So thank you for it. You can post the next question, Libby. Thank you for it. I'm sorry it's happening. I support you in standing in there and preventing your mother from doing things with your family and with your son that are not acceptable by any means. Next question reads, my 14-year-old daughter has been at Evoke for 6 weeks. I spent the last week trying to find a 12-step program I could attend online. I found a Families Anonymous on Tuesdays, but it wasn't great. What 12-step programs do you suggest? Again, especially since the pandemic, the ones that I suggest are any combination of Al-Anon, alanon.org, CODA, Codependence Anonymous, CODA.org, Families Anonymous, and adultchildren.org. Also refugerecovery.org. And let me be clear about this. Let me be clear. Not you might say, well, which meeting is best? And the answer is each individual CODA meeting has its own personality and its own quality. Each Families Anonymous meeting has its own personality and quality, and so on. So the reason that newcomers are encouraged to try a variety and to try 6, and when you go to a meeting, ask other people in the meeting which meetings they like and start to listen for common answers, is because not every meeting has the same quality and the same personality. Even though I don't identify as being the family member of an alcoholic, I've been to Al-Anon meetings that are the best. And I can draw out of them what I need to draw out of them for my own codependency. I think Adult Children of Alcoholics, ACOA, are great meetings. And while you might not identify, and neither do I identify as having parents that are alcoholic, in fact, the last question is case in point, that it's not about the consumption of the chemical. It's about a way of being. It's about a way of operating. So try 6 different ones and try to listen to what people are saying. How do you deal with somebody that you love? Somebody you feel a responsibility towards, parent, child, sibling, spouse. How do you deal with somebody that is self-sabotaging through some compulsive, repetitive behaviors? How do you deal with that? Because all of these are trying to model for us what it means to relate to other human beings. My family and some of you know that around the dinner table with my daughter, her fiance, my wife, we're all therapists. And we were talking the other night, and I was saying to them around the dinner table at one point, codependency has virtually nothing to do with substance abuse. It is present in most cases where there's substance abuse, but it's present in virtually everybody's life. In fact, the APA considered putting codependency in the diagnostic manual that was recently published, the most recent edition, and the insurance lobbyists talked them out of it because everybody would qualify for it. And I meet people that have codependency that at a pretty severe level who have no identifiable substance abusing relative or close family member, significant other. And I meet people that are fairly relatively low on the codependency continuum who have multiple family members. It's a way of being. It's a way of thinking about. It's a way of understanding yourself in relationship to other people. So it takes some work to start to hear it. Try 6. Try ACOA. In fact, I would encourage the person that just asked the previous question to try ACOA, because you're going to hear examples and stories and lessons in that meeting that relate specifically to you. And don't get distracted by the fact that you might have a child on the spectrum and your child's primary or any issue might not be related to substances, because again, it's not about that. It's about how to relate to other human beings. It's really if we were talking about it in clinical terms, because codependency is a pop psychology term, we would be talking about the quality of attachment styles. That's what we'd be talking about. So thank you. Great question. Very common question. Glad it's brought up. Somebody writes, next question reads, what if a parent is able to identify a trauma she has caused to the child? What is the best way to address? Can it be shared with the child? Yes, of course, you can share with the child. Remember, I talk a lot about find reasons and situations to apologize to your child for. And if you can't think of one, ask your spouse or your co-parent, because they'll come up with one that's deserving of an apology. And I say that somewhat humorously. But it's a way of being. See, that's why, for example, the letter of awareness that children write isn't itself awareness. It's an assignment. It's a tool. An apology is a tool that represents a way of relating to another person. Many parents don't want to apologize or admit fault. They're afraid that it will remove the power, the illusion of power that they have over the child. They're aware, they're afraid of the loss of power, the illusion of the loss of power that they have over a child, that my authority will then mean nothing. My child will use my mistakes as an excuse. And the list goes on. But the fact of the matter is, to make an amends, in all 12-step programs, by the way, bridging from the last question, all 12-step programs have in them several steps around making amends to people. There's this belief in that culture that dealing with the people that you've harmed is central to your recovery, either as a codependent person or as somebody who's struggling with a specific chemical or other process addiction. And for me, it demonstrates a humility. Martin Buber talks about the thou relationship, right? It talks about the respect, the dignity. Apologies become evidence of our confidence and our healing. The most enlightened people on the planet are great at apologizing. And the most mentally ill people usually struggle significantly with apologizing. because folks haven't come to terms with who they are, and they are human. They are fallible. That's what so many of our myths and stories are about. It's about becoming a real person. That's what the Barbie movie was about. It was about becoming a real person. And if for some reason you get distracted by the message about patriarchy, you're missing the central point of it. It's about becoming real, becoming fallible, becoming human. So you're modeling that for your child. And what you're doing is you're modeling for them accountability. So I don't care how you do it, but finding ways to embrace that sensibility that you inevitably will dent and bruise your children, psychologically speaking, metaphorically speaking. That's inevitable. You can't escape it. And to defend yourself against that idea, or that the shame and the guilt that result from such experiences, or to not confess and not apologize and not to make amends because the imagined idea that it's going to take away your power, it doesn't come from the power dynamic. It is in direct opposition or out of the power and control paradigm. The very amends and apologies says that you are as valuable and worthy of my amends as I am of yours. And like I said recently on a broadcast, the main point that I make, you want to teach your children accountability? Show them. And because I know that you're all human, all the people that are listening to me are human, you have plenty of humanity to choose from to apologize for. So the words don't matter. I will tell you this, they will probably dismiss it. It probably won't mean anything to them, the apology that you decide to make, or if you share with them your awareness of the trauma that you've inflicted upon them. They will dismiss it. They will distance themselves from it. They will say things like, whatever, it doesn't matter, fine. They'll do all of that. But you're starting to embody with that apology a way of being with them that is profoundly healthy, profoundly human, and a wonderful model for them to consider when living their life with the people that they care about that are around them. So I love the question, and good luck, and say it. They'll probably blow you off, but that doesn't matter. It'll sink in. And after a while, adopt. And that doesn't mean that we become so guilt-ridden that we can't hold boundaries, that we lavish them with gifts because we feel badly. That, again, isn't from a healed place. People in recovery aren't doing these things from a place of being compromised and feeling guilty and ashamed so that that the other person takes care of them. They're doing this because it's to unburden themselves with this sense, this awareness, this knowledge that they've done things to hurt people. It comes from strength. It comes from confidence. Remember, humility is synonymous with confidence. And that false humility or bravado or arrogance is always a compensation for feeling bad about yourself. Like my therapist told me when I was 14 years old, a superiority complex is always a defense against an inferiority complex. So thank you for the question. And your child is lucky to have somebody that's willing to look at themselves and ask this question. If there are specific sensitivities around this subject that you want to check out that might feel like a boundary violation for you or for somebody else, talking to a coach or a therapist would be a good way to sort that out. Next question reads like this. In our son's early life, when his emotional dysregulation was most intense, we were advised by professionals to do the therapeutic holdings to keep him and us safe. They were horrible parenting moments and traumatizing for all of us. Our son, as a teenager, told a therapist about them, and her reaction was condemning, explaining that holdings are frowned upon and shouldn't have happened. Since then, our son has become quite fixated on this topic. We've apologized repeatedly, both privately and under the direction of professionals. I'm not sure where we go from here. That's a great question, and it's a great springboard from the last question. The where you go from here is forward. That's where you go from here. I think the question about where do we go from here, I think it's speaking to that you want your son to get over it. I talked about this on a recent podcast. He gets to have his anger. And in your agenda, like most parents, that he forgive you, that he get over it, is it's the energy that will contribute to him staying stuck in it. So you've done your part. You release it and you let him have his anger for as long as he wants to have it. If you want to know the secret to helping, facilitating, supporting children, contributing to a child's moving through anger and resentment towards you or towards anybody, the main idea is that you try not to get them through it. It's a paradox, like a lot of things. You let them have it. You give them their distance. When you do that, you're demonstrating, this is important, you're demonstrating that it's not about you and your ego. It's not about taking care of you anymore. It's about showing love and taking care of them. I shared a post today on my social media that basically said that when we hold on to the idea of being good, or conversely, when we let go of the idea of being good, then the people around us get to feel what they feel. In other words, another way of saying it, I explained, was when we accept all the parts of ourselves, good and bad, the only thing left over is love. And that's the work, in a way of thinking. And it's a little bit strange to say it this way, but in a way of thinking, when you are able to stop trying to be good, to stop needing to be good, you become better. The goal here isn't to improve. The goal is, as a parent, the goal is to embrace and accept who you are, which ironically, paradoxically, will make you more available to love and compassion and courage. That's the biggest difference. That ego need to be a good parent, a good spouse, a good citizen, a good person, a good friend, and a good boss. The problem with that need is that you will be in defense of any evidence that is to the contrary. So when somebody's mad at you, they need to be not mad at you. When somebody's hurt by you, they need to forgive you. And in that way, everybody around you then is serving your ego. And they might not use these words clinically because they might not have this language, but they can feel it and they don't want to be around it and they feel frustrated. But when you've come to terms and accepted who you are to a certain extent, because nobody fully accomplishes that, but when you take large strides toward accepting who you are, then the people around you get to feel, the people around you get to be themselves. And it's so nice to be around somebody who's done that kind of work, because then you get to say, I'm frustrated, I'm angry, and they listen and they don't defend it and they don't explain that that wasn't my intention, or this is what I meant, or you've misinterpreted me, or what I really, that doesn't happen anymore because the person isn't in defense of good anymore. So that might sound a little bit abstract, but the basic idea is where you go from here is just letting him feel, letting him be mad. And acceptance of that on your side will be your greatest contribution to him being able to move through it. All right. The last pre-submitted question reads this. I've been an avid listener of your podcast and immersed myself in my own work since our son went to his first treatment program over 2 years ago. Since then, I've used less defensiveness and focused on making repairs in our relationship. I suffered a childhood trauma and never realized its impact on my parenting and in my relationships until my son began struggling. I've certainly made gains, but the pace is slow as I face some difficult truths about how the trauma shaped me and the resulting defenses I've developed have impacted the people I love. I have hurt our son in 1,000 ways and have apologized for many things when he's willing to share his wounds with me. My struggle is this. I find myself repeatedly re-apologizing for things I thought we'd covered. Is this because my apologies were ineffectively communicated? My son also likes to reference our transgressions in other discussions as to fortify his position. An example of this is his eagerness to leave his therapeutic boarding school and return home. When we tell him we want to work with your team at school to develop a plan to make your transition home successful, he tells us that we are failing him again and accuses us of not wanting to be parents. He reminds us of all the therapeutic mistakes we've made and how our poor decisions have affected his well-being, so he deserves to be home again. Last fall, a wilderness therapist we trusted diagnosed my son, assigned female at birth, with borderline personality disorder. Could you share any insight about a container for a child with borderline personality disorder? Does that look differently than it does for other struggling children? I've heard you reference the need for stronger boundaries in relationships where manipulation is abundant. Please help me understand if I need more compassion, more boundaries, or both, and how to make the distinction. I want to mention two broadcasts while we're at this. Number one, the broadcast that I did on borderline thinking and functioning is one I would refer you to. And for the last couple of questions and this one, the podcast that is entitled "Changing Notions of What It Means to Be a Good Parent." Those are two podcasts I would recommend for everybody. They're two of my favorite, by the way, because borderline traits, borderline personality, it is the extreme of our stress, our trauma responses. Everybody could be reduced, in a sense, to borderline thinking. Things like us versus them, othering, for example, black and white, all or nothing. Those are all responses that anybody could be reduced to under a significant amount of stress. For the person suffering with borderline features and borderline personality disorder, it's become cemented, a way of thinking, a way of operating. So, having said that, let me tell you this. The statement that I used earlier in the broadcast that I've referred to many times, one of my favorite ideas, mantras, that you cannot win, you can only choose how to lose. You cannot win, you can only choose how to lose, comes specifically from a therapist who worked with borderline clients suffering from borderline personality disorder. So that is the essence of it. You cannot win. And it is our attempt to win that becomes our contribution to the problem. I shared in one of my books about supervising a therapist who was visiting a child in the wilderness, and the child was upset because the previous week she complained that the therapist didn't care, that the therapist spent very little time with her, that when she walked away and she saw her therapist laughing with the staff, that she knew that they were talking about her. Every paranoia you could imagine, every assigning this therapist every bad characteristic you could possibly imagine. And so the therapist was trying to rationally and calmly challenge and explain to the client, the young person, every way that she misinterpreted everything. She wasn't really laughing about her. She met with her the previous week twice as long as everybody else. She was looking for evidence to show to this person that she was wrong. And after watching this exchange go on for a while, I was supervising, I said, may I try something? And everybody, of course, agreed. And I said, well, and I knew this young person's history, that she had lost her parents in different ways, one to prison, one to death, and was being raised by her grandparents and had a significant trauma history. And I said, one thing I said to the therapist, one thing you're trying to convince her is that you care. And one thing she's trying to tell you is that's not her experience. You can't trust that. And so maybe you can just sit with that. Maybe you can just sit with what it's like for her to not believe that anybody's capable of caring. Because after she leaves, no matter how much you care for her in this moment, are you going to be her therapist forever? If not her therapist, are you going to be her friend forever? So she even has a point. But this idea that you have to be the good therapist. See, borderline functioning, borderline traits are the bad feelings. I'm touching my chest for those of you that are listening and not watching. The bad feelings can't be inside of me. The badness has to be out there. That's what racism and homophobia and anti-Semitism is about, right? We find groups to project it onto. People say things like, look at the kids today. That's borderline adults projecting the badness onto children. Children do the same thing to adults. So you have to be willing to hold it. That's the answer. That's the clinical answer. You have to be willing to hold it. You have to be the bad one. You have to choose how to lose. And you can't win, and you can't be good, and you can't come out on top. Having said all of that, it is exhausting, because the name of the game with a person suffering from borderline features and personality disorder, the name of the game is this: you lose, end of game. So you have to lose over and over and over again. And it's exhausting, psychologically speaking, emotionally speaking. It is absolutely exhausting. So you have to make sure that you're getting support, that you have sources of support, and that you have boundaries, which you'll be punished for, which you'll be accused of abandonment for, right? You lose. You'll be accused of every treacherous characteristic and attribute in the world when you take care of yourself, but you have to. And what I love about young people or adults or anybody struggling with these features is that you have to stay on your toes. You can't mail it in. It takes work. The self-care, you have to be religious about your self-care. Remember, the name, or more accurately, the rules of the game with somebody with borderline features and borderline personality disorders: you lose, end of game. That's the whole game. They want to make you feel as hopeless and powerless, as helpless as they feel. They're taking the ugly feelings, the poor self-esteem, self-image, and they're putting it onto you. The therapist who taught me the "you don't get to win, you get to choose how to lose" mantra would describe it as getting their stink on you. Right? They get their. You walk into a group room, you walk into a discussion, and you walk out feeling horrible. That's what it feels like. So it takes work, it takes practice, it takes really a big commitment to self-care, and it takes shifting to this idea that you don't get to be good, you don't get to win, you don't get to come out on top. But you do get, I mean, the saving grace of that, and I don't always finish it this way, is you get to be a self. You don't get to win anymore in this way of thinking, but you get to be a self. You get to be a person, which is so much better than being good. So, wonderful question, difficult situation. I hope you have a good therapist that can help you through this. And again, the two broadcasts I would recommend you to are Changing Your Notions of What It Means to Be a Good Parent and Borderline. I don't know if it's borderline functioning or borderline personality disorder. It has the word borderline in it, so you can search for it that way. I think it might be right around episode 300, give or take 10 or 15, but you can find it. Thank you for the question. Difficult question. All right. Somebody writes in, when dealing with parents setting boundaries and still respecting the idea of parents knowing that they have control over what they don't, how do parents manage issues like drug use? One consequence would be the child just not coming home in order to do the drugs, but that is simply avoiding the problem thoughts. You're asking me some tough questions now. The result of this work is soul expansion. How's that for a start to answer the question? We become larger. We become more capable. We become more flexible. That's not the same as capitulating. That's not the same of compromising your values. It means that you're finding ways to take care of yourself. Your question is a good one. When I was younger, I subscribed to the tough love mantras, the tough love ideas. And I'm not talking about just the idea, the phrase of tough love, but from the book Tough Love, taking doors off kids' rooms and going to any kind of length to manage the behavior. I don't operate that way anymore as a father and as a therapist, a parent educator. I live a lot more in the gray than I used to. And what I know is this. This is important for me to say to you. If you never hear another thing that I say, I want you to hear this. The most important thing is not the behavior. I think it's a worthy fight. I think it's a worthy battle around substance use with children. I really do. I work on it with my child who's still at home, and I have a commitment that my child is not going to be free to use substances while in my home, and I work on it, and it's difficult. Having said that, and there are relapses, and there are uses, and there are consequences that we manage around that. But having said all of that, I'm not going to wait till my daughter is on a hospital gurney before I reprioritize what's important. And the most important thing is the attachment. It's not the drugs. It's not the sexual promiscuity. It's not the lying. It's not the school refusal. It's not even the self-harm, the depression, the anxiety, the body image. Those are the behaviors. Those are the distractions, if you will. They are meant to distract, as Carl Jung explains, they are meant to distract the individual themselves from a deeper and more authentic suffering. And they're meant to distract everybody around them. The most important thing is the attachment, the quality of the relationship. Now, how do we build that? Well, you're not going to be surprised with this answer too. The best way to build the attachment is to do your own work. I don't care how good your childhood was. That's not a predictor of attachment. I don't care how great your parents were. You have to make sense out of your childhood. Bad childhoods can be integrated and resolved. Good childhoods, if not explored, have very little effect. Whatever the good childhood means. So the way that you contribute to this equation is you do your work. But it's not going to be perfect, and there are going to be setbacks, and there's going to be imperfections. And part of me wants to say, let your child think what they think and stand firm on your values and your stance. That's fine. And I believe that, by the way, those are true ideas and principles, authentic. I believe those authentically. And there's another part that he's right. It's messy. I have 4 children. 2 have struggled in the traditional sense that children in our program have struggled with. And even my quote unquote good child, I remember thinking when she was a teenager, I remember thinking, you know what? It's hard, even with a child who's not suffering from acute mental illness or acute substance use disorder. It's still hard. So in some ways, the child has a point. Now, does that point cross the threshold where then you're kind of morally obligated to bring them home when the child is requesting? I don't know. That's not my decision. That's your decision. But it is messy and it is hard and it's not going to be perfect. So I think what I would say to you in all of this is, as always, is do your work. You guys want your children to get better. Everybody that's listening to me, that's watching, wants their children to be happy and healthy. The best way that we know how to do that, and this is not Brad Reedy's idea, this is not Evoke's unique idea, this is the research in attachment. Some of the best research, and if you want a book to read, besides the 2 that I've written that are attachment-based, read Daniel Siegel, Dr. Daniel Siegel from UCLA, the most respected and renowned psychiatrist in the United States today. Parenting from the Inside Out. He co-wrote it with Mary Hartzell. And not only does he espouse the principles that I'm talking about, but he cites all of the historical and current research on the topic. It's cross-cultural. It's cross-socioeconomic status. Doesn't matter how educated you are. The list goes on. You do your work. Go to Al-Anon. Go to Codependence Anonymous. Go to therapy. Go to an intensive. Go to somebody else's intensive, not just ours. You do your work. And it is somebody mentioned in an earlier question tonight, it's a slow slog process. It doesn't move as fast as we want, which gives us some patience for the others in our lives, right? Our children. It's like what Gandhi said when he was interviewed, and this is depicted in the movie called Gandhi. And the report is played by the actress Candice Bergen. Is that how you say her name? think I'm mispronouncing it, but anyway, it doesn't matter. He's asked the question, and he says, I've had very little success with battling my own self, which is why I have so much patience for all the other scoundrels in the world. That's what enlightenment sounds like. You have enough to work on yourself. You have enough mental health issues. You have enough codependency. You have enough self-soothing issues, compulsive issues, trauma responses to work on. And if you work on that stuff, you will have more hope, less depression, and less anxiety. If you focus on your child, the thing that you cannot control ultimately, you will have more depression and more anxiety. That's why the serenity prayer that's said at the end of virtually every 12-step meeting, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. That's the one thing that's said in virtually every 12-step meeting in the world every day, all around the world. Why is that idea, those set of ideas, so important? Because when we focus on things that we can't control, we suffer. We suffer profoundly. When we focus on things that we can control, which is difficult as it is, it's our own growth, we have hope, we have optimism. But our minds and our training and our background tell us that the solution to our problems is our children's distress. And we think that that's love. Ram Dass said very clearly, the only thing you can do for me is work on yourself. The only thing I can do for you is work on myself. The author Anne Lamott said that the greatest love we can give our children is our own work. The child is not the problem. The child is the child. It is incumbent on all of us to do our work, not because we're the cause of all the world's problems. I was listening to a song last night, an old Blink 182 song. That tells you a little bit about my upbringing. And it's a song about suicide, I think. At least I've never read about it, but it sounds like it's about suicide. And at one point, the singer, the writer of the song says, "Please tell mom this is not her fault," is the line. And I was thinking about this last night. Just before I went to bed, and I was thinking, that's it, isn't it? The responsibility that the child feels that the parent hasn't lived their own life and sorted out their own life. And so the child takes it on as, carries it on their back. You want to do your work so your child doesn't have to carry your wounds, doesn't have to carry your trauma. So I'm with you. This is my work. This is what I'm trying to work on. And I'm not a 30-year-old, 35-year-old therapist anymore who has prescriptions and templates for you to follow that if you do it right, your kid's going to turn out okay. It's that thinking that is the problem. That's the poison, not the cure. And yet, if we do our work, like I say in the Journey of the Heroic Parent, if we do our work, we're better parents. Part of that work, though, is not making the child responsible for our joy, for our happiness, for our serenity. That's what you hear at Al-Anon and Codependence Anonymous and Families Anonymous. You hear that your serenity, mom and dad, your serenity is your responsibility, not your child's. And I know that might seem strange to most people. That's why those meetings are so strange for people. But that is the highest form of love. That is what makes you available to the child in more profound ways than if you're clinging tightly to them, trying to make sure that they're okay so that you're okay. All right, last question for this evening. I think we might have some left over. What happens when a child does not succeed or respond in the program? Well, then we make recommendations for you and for the family that address it. That's the answer. We tell you why they're not responding, what about it is not working for them, and what at home might work for them. In some ways, I like to think of it like I've had a handful of clients on my own caseload over the years. I've had well over 1,000 clients on my caseload over the years. And I've had just a handful that I think objectively a lot of people might say, well, that kid didn't get it. But we didn't give up and lose all hope then. We learned. I think I shared the other night that the recent interview I saw from Kobe Bryant when somebody said to him, Are you the kind of athlete? This is when he was live. That seems silly to say, but this was from a few years ago where somebody said, were you the kind of player that was, that was driven to win or driven not to lose? And he said, neither. I was driven to learn. And so whatever happened, I could learn from it. You see how he created a mental construct where whatever happens in life benefited him? You see how that happens? That's an idea from reality therapy. That's a real kind of therapy, by the way. Capital R, reality therapy. It is that with its happiness is within our control, ultimately, or peace of mind, perhaps. Serenity. Meaning is within our control. We will experience joy and pain, and if we love and we love enough, we will experience hurt and sadness and loss and grief. A well-lived life means that you experience a lot of grief and loss. So I'm not talking about that kind of transitory happiness. I'm talking about profound, fundamental sense of meaning, a sense of serenity, a sense of life's satisfaction. That's within your control. So if a child doesn't respond well to the program, we find out what does work for them, and we try to get you and them to that place, to that situation. And sometimes it's outside of the box. Sometimes it goes against the grain. Sometimes it goes against what the dominant culture, even in therapy, are suggesting and teaching. And I've had to support parents at times doing what other professionals have said is the wrong thing. So the parent can figure it out themselves, because at the end of the day, you can't outsource your responsibility to any professional. You can listen to them, and it's wise to seek out therapists and guides and counselors that you trust. But at the end of the day, you're responsible for your parenting decisions. So great questions. And I know there might be some left over, but we'll save those until the next time. Thanks for sending them in. I really appreciate it. All right, folks. My two books, The Journey of the Rogue Parent and The Audacity to Be, are available on Amazon and Audible. If you want to do a deep dive in your own work, there's one spot left in our September 20th. If you're able to attend, I highly recommend it. September 20th through 24th is our next Finding You option. And then the next one after that is October 18th through 22nd. And then November 8th through 12th. Go to our website to find out more. Those are my strongest recommendations for you to help your child. September 15th through 17th is an online version of Finding You. It is about a third of the cost and half of the time, and you don't have to travel. We have Returning to You, which is the sequel to Finding You. And the next available option is March 6th through 10th. The October is full. Finding Connection workshop, I'm going to be hosting in February 7th through 11th, 4 couples. It'll only have space for 4 couples. 4.5-day Finding You workshop with couples. We have custom Finding Connection intensives for couples and for co-parents, and also Finding Family for families. Contact intensives@evoketherapy.com if you have more questions. I run an all-day conscious parenting seminar. I think there's 1 or 2 spots left. We keep it relatively small. September 29th is my next offering. 9:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. Mountain Time with an hour for lunch. It's $400 per person, $700 if you share a screen with your partner. If you want to find out more or register, contact intensives@evoketherapy.com. I love this day. It goes by fast. We have group discussions as well as education, so it's not just me lecturing the entire time. We have support groups for current and alumni families. The next offering is September 14th at 7 p.m. Mountain Time. Once a month, we have an alumni-only offering. September 26th at 6:30 p.m. Mountain Time is that offering. We have an intensives support group every month. October 10th at 6 p.m. is our next offering for that. Go to our website at evoketherapy.com/family-involvement for more information on all of our support groups. If you want to do a family trek during the program, that's a multi-day experience in the wilderness living with your child and therapy. Contact admissions@evoketherapy.com. This could be during the program, at the end of the program, in between programs, before the child comes home. And you don't even have to have a child at Evoke to sign up for this. So the family trek option is available. We have coaches for parents, couples, families, or individuals. This is something that can be done virtually to help with boundaries, parenting and family dynamic issues, marital issues, co-parenting issues, a whole host of issues. contact coaching@evoketherapy.com for more information. We ask all current parents to try, like I mentioned earlier, at least 6 of any combination of the following support groups: Al-Anon.org, CODA.org, FamiliesAnonymous.org, or AdultChildren.org. Also, RefugeRecovery.org or the National Alliance on Mental Illness, NAMI.org, have free classes and resources in your local communities. All of these broadcasts are available on your favorite podcast app or Spotify. Just search Finding You and Evoke Therapy Podcast. You can also go to soundcloud.com on your computer and listen there. And you can find all the rebroadcast videos of these broadcasts on Evoke's YouTube channel. You can find Evoke and me, Dr. Brad Reedy, on Twitter, Threads, and Instagram using the handles @EvokeTherapy and @Dr. Brad Reedy, respectively. Evoke Therapy Intensives is on Instagram. Use the handle @EvokeTherapy Intensives to find us there. And on Facebook, you can find us by searching Evoke Therapy Programs or Evoke Therapy Intensives. Check out our blog. It's wonderfully curated, and it's our staff and therapists sharing their own personal experience with their own growth. If you want to give back for people that can't afford treatment or therapy, the 3 charitable partners that we support and donate to include ChooseMentalHealth.org, Sky'sTheLimitFund.org, and the EvokeFamilyFoundation.org. My next broadcast will be September 19th, a week from tonight. I have an intensive later this week that I'll be running. So September 19th at 6 o'clock Mountain Time, I'll be talking about marriage, divorce, and co-parenting. Great topics. Love that. Love that broadcast. All right, folks. I hope this was a helpful point of contact. Thanks for attending. Thanks for sending in your question. For and on behalf of the people that love you and the people that you love, thanks for showing up this evening and being willing to do your work and listening. Have a great evening, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.